You know, it's really fascinating how conventional wisdom takes hold quickly after big events. And that happened this week after the debate, when the conventional wisdom from the minute after it ended to,
before it ended, well before it ended,
became Mitt Romney did well. The question is, does that really matter, or is that a sugar high?
Well, that's a really good question, because the consensus was stronger than just about any other debate I've seen. I mean, as David said, before it was even over, people, Obama supporters in particular, were slapping their heads saying, this guy is giving it away.
Well, that's what I think the conventional wisdom was formed more on the left than the right. Was, take him, tear the guy up, take him apart.
Right.
You're not doing it.
So if Obama lost the debate rather than Romney winning it, you really got to wonder what kind of sugar high Romney's on. If he doesn't carry it into his campaign performance, I mean, I think a big part of why Romney looked so good is because Obama looked so bad, and he's not going to have Obama on the stump with him.
I think he looked a little lethargic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they just expected more. People had higher expectations for the president. Most people thought that the president would blow Romney out of the water. A lot of people think that Mitt Romney is a bad candidate for president, and that just isn't what you saw on stage last night. But I still think the question is, does it really matter what half a dozen of Obama's supporters in Washington think? And what do voters think? And I still think it'll be a little while to see whether it shifts that.
Yeah, but, when Jim Carville goes on TV and says something like Obama didn't show up last night, that is definitely a sign of alarm, I think, on the Democratic side. So one question is, will Obama readjust his game and come out swinging in the later debates, which are still to come? But the other thing is, I was struck by how Obama has done such a great job, the campaign of caricaturing Mitt Romney as a certain kind of person. And Mitt Romney, it seems to me, his biggest success was to say to the American people, that guy who was running for president in the Republican primary, that's not who you're voting for now.
That's what I thought too. You know, I thought it was less that that there was a great debate moment. There weren't any great debate moments. It was kind of more Romney kind of slowly dismantling the caricature and moving to the center, which we all talked about. Well, Romney's going to move to the center after he gets the nomination. Well, he didn't. I sort of thought he did on Wednesday night.
Yes, I agree with that.
But just look at how much they fought about taxes. I think that's where you really see the caricature, because the President Obama is going out constantly and saying Mitt Romney wants to cut taxes for millionaires and he wants to raise taxes on the middle class, and that's why Romney was so forceful in rebutting that and, basically like ignoring the moderator and taking as much time as he wanted to push back against that point, because he doesn't want to be characterized as the rich guy who doesn't care about the middle class.
No, but also there goes the argument that Republicans are going to cut taxes, right? I mean,
no, he was busy saying, I'm not cutting a dime of your taxes, buddy. Don't get me wrong.
One of my favorite moments in terms of him arguing against his own caricature was when he said, that tax plan you just described to Mr. Obama, I wouldn't vote for that one either.
Right. Well, there was a lot of them. My favorite was, one of them is being a budget wonk, was when Romney says that Obama should have endorsed Bowles Simpson, and Jim Lehrer, in one of his few moments of where he shakes off his lethargy, says,
Governor, what about Simpson Bowles? Will you support Simpson Bowles?
Simpson Bowles, the president should have grabbed that.
No, I mean, do you support Simpson Bowles?
I have my own plan.
No.
Everybody loves Bowles Simpson and nobody supports it. But the substantive point here is whether the economic debate substantively really changed as a result of anything that's been said in the last few days.
I don't think so. I think that for a lot of people who haven't tuned in, there was new information there, but for those of us who've watched all the Republican debates and read the blog posts and all that the campaigns have put out, I don't think either one of them shed any more light on it. They're honing their messages rather than providing us any new information about the two big questions. What exactly are you going to do to create jobs, and how exactly are you going to bring down the deficit? And what both of them told us is, on the first, I got a plan to do that. Read my website, it's somewhere there. And on the deficit, they said, don't worry, I'm going to bring down the deficit, but you're not going to pay more taxes, and you aren't going to get your benefits cut. Someone else is going to get their belt tightened.
Right. I mean, I do think precisely because, as Sarah said, Romney was so determined to put out the message, I'm not cutting taxes on the rich. It really does put more pressure on him. I mean, it's been there all along. To explain how does the math add up?
Right,
how can you do all that you say you're going to do? And Obama at one point did a pretty good job of pulling it all together, And it's a question he's been skating around on the campaign all along. But he was so forceful on that point. And I'm not going to add to the deficit. That was the other thing that he...
And basically, I mean, I think the most interesting part about that is he essentially prioritized it in a way he hasn't done before, which is to say...
Prioritized.
What his, tax cuts versus deficit cutting. I'm
Right.
not going to do a
Right.
tax
That's
cut.
true.
I'm not going to do
Yeah.
this tax plan if it adds the deficit.
Yeah.
And that is not a way that he's phrased it before.
No, but it was the definitive way in which he said,
My number one principle is there'll be no tax cut that adds to the deficit. I want to underline that. No tax cut that adds to the deficit.
which I took to be a statement to independent and undecided voters who, if you look in our polling at least, are much more fixated on the deficit than voters in general.
Right, right. And if his own party and conservatives were unsettled by the fact that he was kind of taking away the "I'm going to cut your taxes" message, I think in general his side would be so encouraged just by the fact that he was so alive and there, and the campaign's not dead.
I don't think, I could be wrong about this, I don't think we'll have lethargy on the stage in the next debate, which is Vice President Biden and Paul Ryan. I think there'll be a lot more energy. I mean, right? You're going to have pumped up, literally and
I think
figuratively.
that's
by their
what he's
characters.
expected. Right, exactly. I mean, the idea that Vice President Biden is going to go out there and deliver a snoozer is kind of a joke. Not anybody's ever seen him in public.
Right, and Paul Ryan always shows up with a lot of energy.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they would have been like that anyway.
That's
but
what
I
they're
think the mandate for Biden to be combative is now overwhelming.
Right, right.
And to go after the specifics, and particularly the point that you were raising, which is to go after the specifics on how do you make these numbers add up, which I think that the president skated up to and then pulled back from. Joe Biden is going to have to, I think, go after that. The numbers don't add up unless you do really mean things.
But also Biden has an easier task because he can go after Ryan's budget, which is a whole lot more detailed than
That's
the
true.
Romney plan. And he doesn't, Ryan then has a choice. Well, that's not Romney's plan, or he has to defend it. So.
And that's the box I assume you'd want him to be in if
Exactly.
you're Joe Biden at this debate. You're going to defend your plan, or are you going to steer
Walk
away from it the way Mitt Romney is kind of? Because you've been out with Romney a lot. He never totally embraces the Ryan budget, does he?
No, I mean, he says he's respectful of it, but he doesn't endorse it. He says he has his own plan. Of course, we haven't seen the details of his own plan. We've seen a lot more details on the Ryan plan. But the problem is, if you don't offer any of your own details to fill in these blanks, in a lot of cases, you're kind of stuck with the Ryan details. And that's why you're going to see Biden bring it up.
Yeah.
One thing I'm wondering about is, just from what I've heard Ryan say and talking to his people, is I think he also sees part of his mission as the kind of truth squatting part of the campaign, that kind of trying to keep Biden from getting away with stuff. And Romney did that a little bit, but he didn't get too bogged down on saying you're lying about my record or stuff.
There's one moment where I thought was very clever of Romney, where he talked about how the middle class is being buried.
Under the president's policies, middle-income Americans have been buried. They're just being crushed.
Very subtly lifting a line that Joe Biden had used and regretted afterwards, that the middle class has been buried over the last 4 years.
But I mean, other than that kind of semi-subtle reference, you didn't have any of the sort of petty knife fighting that has pretty much dominated this campaign
No,
cycle.
but that worked to Romney's benefit, I think, because he got to sort of make all of his points without having to be too mean about it. And we had this conversation about how do you attack Obama without making yourself less
you did a
like
column on that.
Yeah, and it kind of pulled it off in that sense. And that's where I think the people on the left were so upset with the president, because they said basically you let him sort of drone on about this stuff, take apart your plan, defend his own, and you never made him talk about 47% or Bain Capital, or you have the car elevator in the new garage in your house. All that stuff they would love to sort of chew on constantly. Just didn't get there.
Well, it wasn't just the stuff that he didn't say, but a lot of the stuff that he did say was, well, we kind of agree on corporate taxes, and we kind of
agree on
agree
Social
Social
Security.
Security. I mean, it was kind of breathtaking the way
Energy
he just
even.
kind of gave him a pass on Social Security.
And I do think, going into this, the Romney people were telling us, look, it's a lot harder to be mean. It's a lot harder to really twist someone's plan when you're on the stage with them. And so I think that they were kind of expecting to go into a scenario where they're taking a little bit of the president's edge away, even though they were publicly trying to downplay expectations.
The other thing I think we discovered this week, or were reminded of this week, is that there's still wild cards in the deck. There's Libya, what happened when the ambassador was killed there. There's Syria and Turkey firing guns at each other all of a sudden. There's the Iranian question, and there's the question of what are the what do the economic statistics tell us in the last
Right.
5 weeks? We don't know the full agenda here, that we don't have the full script
Well,
yet.
my guess is that the economic statistics will not change enough to really change anybody's mind. But as yesterday or this week rather showed, that when Turkey starts shelling Syria, the potential for something to happen in the Middle East that's very distracting, whether it's taking hostages of U.S. diplomats instead of killing them, or some kind of shooting war, is just enormous. And I think it's really important that the two debates between the presidential candidates and one vice presidential debate are not the only things that are going to happen between now and then.
No, and particularly interesting now that last presidential
On
debate is
foreign
going to be on
policy.
foreign policy, which we all probably a month ago thought would be a snoozer, not anymore.